Can't Do That on Television, it was really successful, was because it was based on the psychology of where kids are. And I often say it's the most psychologically important show ever done for kids.
The exploitation of You Can't Do That on Television. The actors, the writers, the slime. Hi, and welcome to the exploitation of your favorite childhood television series, You Can't Do That on Television. You remember the slime. You remember the laughs. What you probably don't remember is what was signed behind the scenes. This is Slime Exposed, where contracts come out of hiding and the truth finally gets messy. So grab a cup of tea or maybe a pot, because this time it's not green slime getting spilled. Before we get to the slime timeline, we have a few matters to discuss. Let's start with the exploitation of the You Can't Do That on Television actors. Les Lye, Abby Hagyard, Christine McGlade, and so many others. Every actor on You Can't Do That on Television, child or adult, was contracted through ACTRA, the Alliance of Canadian Cinema, Television, and Radio Artists. Well, that's what the paperwork says. What actually happened was a little more complicated. A producer shaped by Britain, unleashed in Canada. As an experienced professional producer, Roger knew that working in Canada would differ greatly from his years in Britain. Wanting to understand the system, he familiarized himself with the actor agreements. He was surprised to learn that, at the time, Canadian child performers were only guaranteed payment if they were ACTRA members. Children could still appear in television productions without joining the union, and in those cases, producers were not required to pay them. This contrasted sharply with Roger's experience in the UK, where child performers in professional television, radio, theatre, and film productions were required to be members of the British Actors Union Equity and to be paid accordingly. British regulations also required child performers to hold a license issued through child production authorities, undergo regular medical checkups to ensure their well-being, and have a portion of their earnings placed in a trust until adulthood. To Roger, the lack of equivalent formal protections and safeguards for child actors in Canada was both surprising and concerning. Roger wanted to secure as much protection as possible for the children he had chosen for the series. His first step was to get them into the union. He called the ACTRA office in Ottawa and was put through to the local representative, another Brit named Sybil Cook. Roger explained that he was producing a new children's television show. Sybil's first question was whether the kids were already ACTRA members. When Roger said they weren't, she replied matter-of-factly, "Then there's no problem. You don't have to pay them." "I know that," Roger said, "which is exactly why I want them to join the union." There was a pause.
"Are you sure you're the producer? Do you know what a producer does?"
Sybil said, genuinely startled that a producer would voluntarily choose to pay actors who didn't legally have to be paid. Roger explained that he wanted the children to have protections that union membership provided. Sybil eventually came down to the studio,
"Hello, children.
helped the kids complete their membership applications,
Parents, you sign here."
and ensured the forms were properly countersigned by their parents. Roger felt satisfied. The young performers whose lives he knew he was about to upend would now have a union looking out for them. Unfortunately, he could not have been more wrong. And here's a fun twist. That ACTRA representative's posh British accent would later inspire Abby Hagyard to mimic it for the voice of the librarian character on the show.
Excuse me.
What is it?
Do you have any copies of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People?
How to win friends and influence people? What's the matter, Christine? Can't you get any friends, dear? Is it your halitosis, perhaps? Your illiteracy? Your inability to get a decent job? Well, I'm sorry, young lady. You are out of luck. We do not have that book.
Thanks anyway.
Life imitates art, and in this case, Art definitely imitated ACTRA.
Article B512, residuals and use payments shall be distributed to performers through ACTRA PRS. Here, ACTRA.
How ACTRA Ottawa connects to You Can't Do That on Television. ACTRA has branches across the country, but none are more directly tied to You Can't Do That on Television than the Ottawa branch. Because one of its founding members was none other than Les Lye himself, along with his longtime friend and professional partner, Bill Luxton. Les Lye, of course, went on to become the only male actor on You Can't Do That on Television, a core pillar of the show's identity.
I heard that.
He also voiced multiple characters in the Care Bear specials.
I'm not supposed to have feelings. Go away. What? I'm starting to cry.
So, he wants to get even, does he? Well, I've got something that will fix every kid in this town.
And even inspired a character specifically created for him in The Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin.
Yes. At long last. Call an emergency meeting of the Bravo Council to be held in the main war room.
But here's a fact that deserves attention. Despite Les's foundational role in ACTRA Ottawa and his decades of contributions to Canadian television, neither he or his family has received any residuals or reused payments for his work since 1995. And Les is not alone. After speaking with many of the actors whose episodes are currently streaming on Paramount Plus since 2021, the answer was the same across the board. No payments. Nothing. Zip. Zilch.
Hey, Zilch,
Yeah.
how's Sparks treating you this week?
You know, I can't complain.
Oh, that's good.
No, he won't let me.
I heard that.
This is especially striking when you consider that Les Lye and Christine McGlade were the only two must-have performers explicitly named in the original contracts with Nickelodeon alongside Roger Price. Alistair Gillis would later join them on the contracts for season 5. They were the core team, the backbone of the show. Without them, You Can't Do That on Television simply wouldn't have become the cultural landmark it did.
Well, you don't have to be a know-it-all to guess that today's show is all about know-it-alls. That rather annoying group of people who... Oh, Christine. We may as well stop. Ross!
What?
Alistair, we let you do the introduction and you blew it. What's wrong with you?
Let's take a deeper look at the contracts. What the ACTRA contracts guaranteed. ACTRA contracts in the 1970s, 80s, and early 90s were built on 3 pillars: initial payment for work performed, residuals for continued use, and in some American distribution cases, a 5-year U.S. buyout clause allowing a network to use an episode in the United States for a limited window without ongoing residuals. These clauses were standard for Canadian-produced programs sold internationally. But here's the part many viewers and perhaps many executives don't know.
Ooh.
A buyout isn't forever. It's a temporary placement for residuals, not a permanent surrender of rights. Granting perpetuity in a country and its territories does not grant worldwide indefinite use without further compensation. Buyouts have time limits, and when that 5-year period expires, the contract returns to its original default.
Well, duh.
Residuals are owed for continued use.
Obviously.
When the buyout clock ran out for most seasons of You Can't Do That on Television, the 5-year U.S. buyout expired by 1989. For the later batch of episodes, the expiration point was late 1994 or mid-1995, meaning that for every rebroadcast, every VHS or DVD release, every online upload, and every modern streaming appearance after those dates, residuals should have been paid.
Oh, no!
So it raises a bigger question.
Okay.
How is it that not a single payment has been issued? Even as the episodes continue to resurface, they've been used in network rebrands, nostalgia programming blocks, and major streaming launches. From the splat in 2015, the unexpected reappearance of 14 episodes on Paramount Plus, Nickelodeon's modern successor, the question isn't should residuals be paid, the question is, why weren't they? Let's break this down a bit clearer, shall we? The first 13 episodes were licensed for just $1, limited territories for 5 years. Yes, that's 13 episodes for $1. That's less than 8 cents per episode. Those episodes were delivered in 1984. The license expired in 1989. Yet those same 13 episodes later aired in 2004, 2015, 2017, and have been streaming on Paramount Plus since 2021. Nickelodeon was literally built on that $1 investment. Probably the greatest story, too shameful to be told, but here it is, just like a pie in the face. Now, let's get back to the video. So, where is Carlton Productions in all of this? It followed the station, passing from Bushnell to Standard to Baton to CTV and now Bell Media. The ownership changed, but the production library and its obligations remained with Bell Media, the modern owner of CJOH-TV and the Carlton Productions Library. And ownership doesn't just mean control of the asset. It means responsibility. Responsibility for accounting, for compliance, and for ensuring that the performers are properly compensated when their work continues to be exploited. Which raises an unavoidable question.
Another one?
If residuals went unpaid, responsibility may not stop with Paramount. Bell Media may share that burden. To understand why, you have to look at how the contracts were structured. In 1984, under the Warner-Amex agreement, Carlton guaranteed that the episodes would be delivered free of union or guild claims, but only for a limited time. That window was 5 years of U.S. cable exhibition. After those 5 years, the obligation shifted. If Warner-Amex, later MTV Networks, continued exploiting the series, they were required to secure guild clearances and pay all talent reuse fees themselves. That structure was reinforced in 1985 when Carlton and MTV Networks signed a new production and distribution agreement. The rule was clear. Carlton handled the front-end clearance. MTV Networks handled the long-term residuals. Any cable broadcast after 5 years, and any exploitation in other media, home video, merchandising, or foreign distribution within MTV's territory, became MTV Networks' financial responsibility. The amendments that followed from 1986 through 1989 didn't change that framework, they doubled down on it. One clause made it explicit. MNI, not Carlton, is solely responsible for all applicable union or guild payments for all uses in the MNI territory other than basic cable exhibition within the first 5 years. The insert, 10.03, is an agreement between the production and the distributor. It does not concern the actors or ACTRA, as their contracts are directly with Carlton, aka Bell Media.
Okay.
Even home video follows the same logic. In 1987, residuals and talent fees for videocassettes were treated as above-the-line costs, paid by MTV Networks and recouped before profits were split. In short, Carlton cleared the show for its initial life. MTV Networks carried the cost once the show lived on, and the contracts anticipated what would happen if those payments weren't made. They included indemnification clauses and legal shields if MTV Networks failed to pay residuals after the 5-year window. Carlton was contractually protected. MTV Networks were required to hold Carlton harmless against any claims, damages, or liabilities, which means that if performers or unions came knocking years later, the contracts pointed them legally back to MTV Networks. The practical effect is unmistakable. Carlton's risk was short-term. MTV Networks' liability was long-term, and the failure to pay wasn't just an oversight. It would constitute a breach of contract, triggering indemnification, reimbursement, and even termination rights. So when the question of unpaid residuals arises, the paper trail leads to one conclusion: Carlton cleared the front end. MTV Networks and successors own the cost of reuse, and any current rights holder exploiting that library inherits not just the revenue, but the responsibility that comes with it. The documentation required And there's even more paperwork involved. Because this system is built for transparency, the residual trail includes distribution reports from U.S. networks, revenue reports from the Canadian producer, remittance forms sent to ACTRA, ACTRA sends to ACTRA PRS, which records payments for each performer.
Hello?
It is a straightforward system. It has been in place for decades. And when things are working properly, every performer can be traced and every dollar accounted for. So what went wrong? The actors fulfilled their contracts, the show continues to generate value, yet the very actors, writers, and the creator who built it haven't seen a single payment in decades. This isn't just a clerical error, it's a fundamental breach of contract between performers, unions, production companies, and distributors. The missing money question. Now that we understand how the American to Canadian payment system is supposed to work, a far more uncomfortable question emerges.
Another one?
If the paper trail is so clear, if the system is so standardized, if the steps from network to producer to ACTRA PRS to performer are documented, then how is it possible that multiple You Can't Do That on Television cast members and the family of Les Lye report no residual payments for decades? Let that sink in.
Okay.
The process leaves footprints. Money leaves footprints. Yet for the performers from You Can't Do That on Television, those footprints seem to vanish after the early to mid 1990s. Where the paper trail breaks. There are only a few places where the chain can collapse. Not by magic, by paperwork. Breakpoint number 1, the production company. If a Canadian producer fails to report U.S. sales, fails to update ACTRA PRS, or simply stops filing distribution reports, ACTRA PRS has nothing to calculate and the performers receive nothing.
We still didn't get paid for the work we did. That's not right.
Breakpoint number 2, missing or incomplete performer data. ACTRA needs the production company's daily performer reports. Who worked? How long did they work? What were they paid? Which contract terms apply? If those logs disappear, are incomplete, or were never submitted, ACTRA cannot properly assign units or residual amounts.
Sorry, there is still nothing for you.
Prior to 1990, ACTRA covered both actors and writers under the same contract. Then ACTRA split into 2 separate unions, ACTRA and the Writers Guild of Canada. As the creator and writer, Roger Price's documents should have been moved to the Writers Guild of Canada. We've been keeping in touch with both unions, and the response from each has basically been, I don't know. That's not the answer you want to hear from professionals, especially adults. They should either know or at least say, good question. Let's find out. Breakpoint number 3, contractual loopholes. Some early contracts were written before modern distribution models existed. So when the show exploded internationally, sold to Nickelodeon, syndicated, re-aired,
I just don't know.
clipped, and streamed, not all of that activity was automatically captured under existing agreements. Breakpoint number 4, non-reporting of American activity. The U.S. network pays the Canadian production company, but if that company never reports what it received, the performers never see a penny. It's not just a paperwork issue, it's a legacy issue. These were Canadian performers working under Canadian contracts for a show that became a U.S. cultural phenomenon. And for many, the residual trail went dark long before the internet era, a system designed for clarity on paper. ACTRA PRS is designed specifically to avoid this problem. Every step is supposed to be traceable. Distribution reports from networks, revenue statements from producers, remittance forms sent to ACTRA PRS, performer unit calculation, final checks or deposits to actors.
Thank you.
And waiting for them right at the end of the line is the Canada Revenue Agency, Canada's equivalent to the IRS. In theory, it's a perfect audit-ready loop. In practice, when one player stops reporting, the performers, often minors at the time, fall through the cracks. You Can't Do That on Television was especially vulnerable. You Can't Do That on Television sits at an unusual intersection. It's a Canadian production that has a U.S. network buyer having a cast of children in a pre-digital paperwork era. How Nickelodeon might have classified You Can't Do That on Television. To understand how payments could vanish, we must look at how Nickelodeon categorized You Can't Do That on Television inside its internal programming system. Classification isn't just a label. It determines how a show earns money, how residuals are tracked, and whether performers ever qualify for payment at all. Three major possibilities existed within Nickelodeon's system. Possibility number one, acquired programming. A simple acquisition means the network buys a package of episodes outright for a fee. No ongoing residuals. No per-airing payments. Just a one-time deal. If You Can't Do That on Television was treated this way in certain contracts, it would explain why performers never saw a dime from U.S. reruns. But the contracts didn't say that. The original agreement was for a 5-year buyout only. After that, the episodes could be bought out again, and any future deals would require proper union payments. Possibility number two, promo or interstitial programming. Some networks categorize imported shows as promotional or filler content, especially in the early cable era. Promotional classification often falls outside standard residual frameworks. It may not trigger payment obligations at all, even if the show airs constantly. But that is not the case with You Can't Do That on Television. It was no filler. It was the only show to have ratings. And here's Fred Seibert addressing this very topic.
Went into Nickelodeon, and the people who ran it, a lot of people had been fired because it was failing. And they had one show that got a rating, which is a show from Canada called You Can't Do That on Television. It's where the whole idea of slime originated in that show. And like randomly, what was the phrase? I don't know. They would say, I don't know, and slime would fall down on their head, and that's how that whole thing sort of started. And they said, you know, we think that the rest of our shows should be like this too, because the thing that we keep finding out is we keep telling kids that we're fun, but we're really not, except for this show. And that's the reason that show got the rating and everything else got zeros.
Obviously.
Possibility number three, co-production or partnership. At times, Nickelodeon publicly treated You Can't Do That on Television as a defining show, promoting it heavily, branding it as the flagship show, and building its early identity around its success. But if this branding wasn't reflected in the legal classification, then the financial model might never have changed. This means Nickelodeon could market You Can't Do That on Television as the show that built the network, while the performers' contracts remain locked in outdated acquisition frameworks. Yet once again, the contracts make it clear. What happens when a show is classified incorrectly? This classification doesn't just cause confusion, it causes decades of missing payments. Why it matters today. And this leads to the heart of the issue. Today, the show is once again generating value through streaming, nostalgia marketing, and renewed public interest. Yet the performers who created that value have not received any payments since the mid-1990s. A buyout that expired decades ago cannot justify zero compensation today. And finally, breach of contract. So what happens when one party fulfills their commitments, acting, writing, creating, and the other party does not uphold the financial terms? That's the definition of breach.
Well, duh.
What happens when a show is monetized globally, but the people who made it never see a cent? These are not nostalgic questions, they are legal ones. And they shape how Canadian work is valued, respected, and protected across borders. It's time to speak up.
It's time to speak up.
When people talk about You Can't Do That on Television, they talk about the slime, the kids, the water, the chaos.
Dougie! Stop bouncing on the bed! Dougie!
makes you think I was bouncing on the bed?
But almost nobody ever talks about the writers. Without them, You Can't Do That on Television wouldn't exist. Full stop.
Period! Period!
No scripts means no slime. No tone.
No!
No irreverence. No show.
No.
And without that show, Nickelodeon doesn't survive its early years. It doesn't become the cultural engine it's remembered as today. Yet the spotlight moved elsewhere. Executives like Geraldine Laybourne and Anne Sweeney and many others saw their careers accelerate on the back of programming powered by writers who rarely got named, credited, or protected. But for Roger Damon Price, he is remembered as the person who taught the industry how to instantly grab a child's attention. It wasn't a fluke, it was a proven success again and again. That's why Canada sought him out.
Hey, buddy!
He was the best. It's also why Nickelodeon came looking for him.
Hi!
He was seen as the godfather of Nickelodeon. His photo once hung on the wall there and may still be there today. And even now, Geraldine has always acknowledged Roger when speaking about her own early success.
Roger was a powerful teacher for me because he really did understand what kids needed at that time in the 80s. If you think about it, mothers were going to work for the first time, divorce rates were high, kids were either coming home alone or into school, after-school programs. They were being confidants of their parents, and they needed a place where they could just be kids, and that became our mantra. Roger had the pulse on where kids were and what their needs were, and he was a big advocate for reverse psychology. So he felt like if you want to get through to kids, don't tell them you should do this and, you know, this is good for you, but rather join them.
For Roger, that gift for understanding children isn't just about one generation. It was about all generations. Here's Roger's statement.
It dealt with psychological concerns of the target age group.
It wasn't just about understanding children, but understanding them as tiny humans. How they talked, connected, and shared. From schoolyards to friendships, kids created the buzz themselves, and it went nationwide.
So we started with an audience too low to be measured. By the end of show 2, we had a good measurable audience. By the end of show 4, we were the highest rated show in the time slot on a Saturday morning against all the American channels and everything else. By the end of and executives at CJOH, with the exception of Larry Nichols and Bryn Matthews, were agitating to get this terrible show taken off the air. I mean, I forget the name of the guy, but he became a big fan later on. The guy who ran the advertising department, friends at his golf club, have been saying, how can you associate yourself with a company broadcasting a show like that? Because we did say things which might make adults uncomfortable sometimes. Because there is a conspiracy of adults against children. Always has been and there always will be. It's just there is a conspiracy of children against adults, actually, once they become teenagers. But so these people would basically going to Larry Nichols and saying, you've got to take that show off. They changed their tune when by week 6, the audiences of all the other channels, ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS, TVO, CBC, CHCH, you name them, added together could not match the rating.
Now, let's pause for a moment and ask, what if Roger wrote the first 6 episodes in the UK, but he knew from past experience that management would probably object, so he wrote it into the script. With Roger, success wasn't accidental, it was repeatable. Still, what if the answer had been no?
Cancelled!
Last week, At this time, I was most distressed to see our television station broadcasting a program which was most unsuitable for impressionable young people. I would like to tender our sincerest apologies to all parents who must have been offended. This week, however, we have a worthwhile educational program. That it?
Ew! Please, Mom, police! I'd rather clean my room than watch Nickelodeon. Yuck! Nickelodeon's a baby channel.
But that scenario didn't happen now, did it? You Can't Do That on Television became an overnight success for Nickelodeon, allowing them to climb the ranks, making their brand iconic and their network legendary.
See the television ratings, they just came in.
Oh,
There, sir.
all right. Thank you. Kid stuff. You can't do that on television. They must be joking. That many? Oh, where'd I put that? There it is. And now it is with great pleasure that I present our hilarious and most successful local television show for children. You Can't Do That on Television.
You Can't Do That on Television on Ottawa's CJOH-TV reached 6% of metro households with a 32 share across the Ottawa designated market area. The show's reach soared to 27% of households, up from 4% in March 1978. Weekly ratings climbed from 4% in weeks 1 and 2 to 9% in week 3. Cab numbers, which track audience potential across Canadian households, showed 65%, highlighting just how big the show had become.
But then we looked at shows like You Can't Do That on Television, and I think one of the geniuses who really informed a lot of what happened at Nickelodeon was a guy named Roger Price, who was the producer of You Can't Do That on Television. And Roger believed that all kids feel stupid and alone on the inside. And I think that that was such a powerful truth, you know, that he articulated, and that we wanted to be able to speak to that. Not to change it, but to recognize it and sort of name it.
The brand became iconic.
Great comedy. So even if you thought Nickelodeon was for little kids, that doesn't mean you can't change your mind. Nickelodeon on your local cable channel.
The network became legendary. The people who wrote it largely erased. Yet as the show succeeded, the spotlight shifted away from the writers and towards executives and branding. The writers in the shadows. Who wrote the jokes that pushed buttons? Who invented the sketches that made adults nervous and kids howl? Who shaped the strange, sharp, satirical voice of a show that never quite behaved? Those people, those pens in the shadows, were part of a system that at the time barely knew how to categorize them. And once you start pulling the thread, the whole sweater of Canadian television labor history starts to unravel. We'll be referring to Carlton Productions and Bell Media as the phone company, at least for this next bit.
Where are we? Excuse me. I'm not as scared of skeletons. Right. I'm not as scared of vampires either.
Me neither.
I'm not scared of werewolves or ghosts.
Right.
I'm not as scared of the phone company.
I am scared of the phone company. Yes, sir.
The writers before the Writers Guild of Canada. Before 1991, there was no Writers Guild of Canada. Writers working on Canadian TV, especially variety and children's programming, were organized under ACTRA, the Alliance of Canadian Cinema, Television, and Radio Artists. ACTRA mainly represented performers. Writers were folded in, almost like an extension, a branch, an annex. They had contract language, yes. Minimums, yes. But recognition, enforcement, archiving, well, that depended on the production, the broadcaster, the paperwork, and whoever was behind the desk that week.
Hello. Well, of course, this is Sybil.
And yet, despite some bureaucratic haze, the writer's room at You Can't Do That on Television produced some of the sharpest youth comedies on television. It included Roger Damon Price, the creator himself, who shaped the DNA of the entire format. And along with them, a rotating bench of talent. Adam Reed, Josh Morris, Rick Jones, Dan Lalonde, Dick Cooper, Brian Nickel, Les Lye, Bob Black, and Bill Prady, long before The Big Bang Theory became a global hit, and many others. These were the people crafting the show's voice, even while the system around them didn't quite know how to file them. The union that didn't exist until it did. Then came 1991. The WGC, Writers Guild of Canada, was formed as an independent body, an actual dedicated union for writers. By 1993, it was formally certified. From that moment on, screenwriters in Canada had a home that was fully theirs. To reconcile the past, thousands of contracts from ACTRA Productions were reclassified into a category still used today. Writers Guild of Canada, ACTRA, a label meaning those writers worked under ACTRA before the WGC existed, and their work was transferred into the new system. For many series, that transmission was smooth. For others, well, the paperwork got a little fuzzy. And for You Can't Do That on Television, fuzzy might be an understatement. The missing records problem. The obvious question. If the show ran for over a decade, where are the contracts? The Bell contracts, Nickelodeon contracts, ACTRA contracts, the WGC ACTRA contracts. For Roger Price, the actors and the writers. Collectively, we have a lot of them. In fact, we hold most of what Nickelodeon themselves have. But gaps remain. And those gaps tell a story all their own. Under normal conditions, pre-2008 contracts should have been sent to the WGC for record keeping.
Obviously.
And when they weren't, they often ended up in the bluntest possible archival category. Contracts received before Y2K are placed in storage. But storage can mean a lot of things. Sometimes a temperature-controlled warehouse. Sometimes a metal cabinet in a union office. Sometimes it's a literal cardboard box labeled with a Sharpie shoved under a staircase. And sometimes, and this is not an exaggeration, it's a box in a basement storeroom, sealed sometime in the Mulrooney years, back when George H.W. Bush was in the White House. A dungeon of paperwork, a crypt of forgotten series, a place where contracts go to hibernate or disappear. If the You Can't Do That on Television files were never sent at all, they may still be sitting in a filing cabinet in Ottawa, or at CTV Ottawa in the Byward Market. We simply don't know. Why this matters? This isn't administrative trivia. For writers, paperwork is ownership. It's recognition. It's proof of contribution. Without those contracts properly archived, residuals can vanish. Credits become unstable. And the creative history of a show becomes harder, sometimes impossible to legally trace. And there's another complication. In 2010, CGOH-TV's Maryvale Road facility caught fire.
And the TV station caught fire February 7th.
What was damaged, what was saved, and what was already gone has never been publicly cataloged in detail, which means some of those records may not be misplaced.
Look at the shape of these tapes. Clearly the tapes are lost forever.
Especially a show like You Can't Do That on Television, where the concept wasn't just a script, it was a format, a structure, a blueprint of comedy that influenced Nickelodeon itself.
I know.
Writers like Price fostered an environment where Prady, Reed, Morris, Jones, Lalonde, Cooper, Nickel, Lye, and many others were given a chance. And in doing so, those writers weren't just typing punchlines. They were co-architects of satire for kids, something networks were terrified of. They were bending censorship, poking at politics, mocking institutions, and giving children something they rarely got on TV.
Today's show is all about censorship, and fortunately, we live in a free country where we can say or do practically anything we want.
That's what you think. New script. The censor board is going to do something about this show, starting today.
You mean we can no longer say words like or...
That's right. You can't say them.
Oh, good. And are we also going to get rid of all the violence on the show?
No more violence against the adults. Kids still get it just the same, of course.
Just like in real life.
A show that respected their intelligence. And that matters because this show didn't stop earning. You Can't Do That on Television is currently streaming on Paramount+. It has been there since 2021. That is a modern platform, modern distribution, and modern revenue well beyond the original broadcast terms those writers worked under. Which raises a harder question. Who is being paid now? Streaming licenses generate money. Platform deals generate money. Ongoing availability generates money. But without clear, traceable contracts, which we have, and wish they would read the ones they have. If their paperwork is missing, then the money doesn't disappear. It simply goes somewhere else. And the writers who shaped one of the most culturally influential children's shows of the 20th century may be watching their work continue to earn without them. This isn't about nostalgia. It's about money. It's about labor. And it's about rights in an era where old shows never stopped generating new revenue. Because satire doesn't write itself. And slime, no matter how funny, doesn't fall without a script.
Well, Alistair, how am I supposed to show them how it works when I don't know how it works? Yeah.
Speaking of slime, let's talk about the real mess. And believe it or not, it's not the slime. For years, the public was told the simple story that green slime belonged to Nickelodeon, a network tradition, a branding gimmick, a harmless symbol of fun. But that story does not survive contact with the contracts. This expose is not about nostalgia. It is about ownership. It is about the chain of title, and it is about how an expressive element created for a television series was quietly transformed into a network-wide commodity without a documented transfer of rights. Green slime did not originate as a Nickelodeon brand. It originated as a narrative punishment device inside You Can't Do That on Television, a series created by Roger Price and produced in Canada for what would basically become Carlton Productions. Slime was not decorative. It was not arbitrary. It was not a logo. It was choreographed, triggered, and contextual. It fell only when a specific condition was met, the spoken phrase, "I don't know."
Very interesting. Is it always green?
That limitation mattered because under the governing production and distribution agreements, Nickelodeon did not acquire the ownership of the format, the concept, the characters, or the unique elements of the series. Those rights remained with the creator. This is reinforced directly by Bryn Matthews, executive producer at CJOH-TV and signing officer for Carlton Productions, who stated in writing, "To the best of my recollection, Carlton Productions retained ownership of the produced episodes, while the creator, Roger Price, retained copyright in the intellectual property, the title, format, concept, characters, and unique elements of the series." Slime was one of those unique elements. There is a connection one has with their creations, something iconic that will help them remember their time in that world. They can move along, but with a memento. And in this case for Roger, it was slime, but not for the reason you think. Before Roger Price started children's comedy, there was an idea, and that idea, it did not start on television. The origin of green slime. Green slime did not originate on Nickelodeon. It did not originate on Canadian television, and it did not begin as a gag long before it became a spectacle. Slime was an idea. It was a consequence, a punishment, a response to knowledge ignored. Its origins are not found in comedy, but in science fiction. In the early 1970s, Roger Damon Price was writing The Tomorrow People for Thames Television in the United Kingdom. At the same time, the novels and teleplays were being developed and approved together, the page and the screen in parallel. Within those early scripts and stories existed a force unlike anything in children's television. Slime had a name. Jedediah. Publicly known within the story as the Guru, Jedediah was worshipped, feared, and obeyed. But his true form was never meant to be human, and it was never meant to be mechanical. Jedediah was slime, a sentient, corrosive green mass, one that did not punish randomly, but systematically. When television could not yet realize that vision, Jedediah was contained. A robot was built to house him, a vessel, not a redesign. Trust me, never ask Roger about the robot. The nicest way to state it is he hated it. Because the idea was already complete, slime was not humiliation for entertainment. It was judgment. And it was aimed at those who refused to take responsibility for what they knew. That idea did not disappear. It evolved. After The Tomorrow People's first season, Roger Price was repeatedly sought out to create youth-driven comedies built around the same principle. Children who speak truth to power and systems that punish them for it. You Must Be Joking in 1974. Pauline's Quirks in 1976.
And the star of your show, Pauline Quirk.
I should have known.
You Can't Be Serious in 1978.
This week it's my pleasure to introduce one of the really big names in show business. Someone with a large range of talent. A television heavyweight, Miss Pauline Quirk.
Each refined what would become known as the Roger Price comedy format. Then, in 1979, Roger Price was requested by Bryn Matthews on behalf of Canada's need for programming targeting the 8 to 17-year-old market. That format crystallized into something new.
Hi, and welcome to a very exciting and highly amusing episode of You Can't Do That on Television. Oh boy, the things they make you say if you want to be famous these days.
The constraint? 2 countries, 1 creator. Roger Price's exit from The Tomorrow People was not a creative failure. It was a logistical impossibility. The Tomorrow People required UK-based development, oversight, and continuity. You Can't Do That on Television required full-time presence in Canada. Late 1970s, early 1980s production realities made transatlantic showrunning impossible. Something had to give, and it was The Tomorrow People. Not because Roger lost interest, but because You Can't Do That on Television was alive, evolving, and generative, while The Tomorrow People was already institutionalized. This is where slime reemerges, but not as a monster. The name Jedediah was removed, but the character was not. In Roger Damon Price's mind, the slime never stopped being Jedediah. Jedediah simply de-evolved. "I don't know" was a phrase that irritated Price. Not because children lacked the answer, but because they used it when they did know. To escape responsibility that became the trigger, Jedediah's slime took on a new form, a new function, a new rule. He only appeared when somebody refused to engage with what they already knew on You Can't Do That on Television. Green slime did not fall at random within the world of the show. It was a mechanism triggered by the authority in charge behind the scenes. It was a cue. Dean Carley, or a member of the props crew on a ladder just out of frame waiting for the line. But the rule never changed. It fell when a performer said 3 words, "I don't know." That was the rule always. This matters because slime was not punishment for being wrong. It was punishment for refusing to engage, for evading responsibility, for opting out of knowledge. The same moral logic that governed Zedekiah. It was judgment.
Probably wasn't until we screened You Can't Do That on Television that came from Canada that we had the moment that crystallized really where this was going. And I think that show informed everything that we did going forward.
The statement. Before Roger Price, the messy punishment known as gunge was made from an assortment of items, food of all types, water, tea, dry paint, and thickeners. Performers called it gunge, gunging, or gunged. No matter what the ingredients were, Roger took the idea of gunging and transformed it. He created something entirely new, slime. With it came new meanings. Slime, slimed, sliming. A new vocabulary spoken fluently by kids. The recipe was simple: water, gelatin powder, oatmeal, and food coloring. Later refined with baby shampoo, not for effect, but to make the cleanup easier. Slime was different from anything that came before. It wasn't just green, it was hazard green. The color nature uses to say, "Do not touch." The shade reserved for warning labels, radiation symbols, and things that glow right before something goes wrong. Its texture was engineered, so you can't say, "I don't know." Its use was controlled and its meaning was never accidental. Unlike generic grunge, mud, pie filling, or whatever happened to be cheap that week,
Mashed potato!
slime was a designated expressive element operating under Roger Price's rules and inside his storytelling system. That distinction isn't cosmetic, it's legal. 1979 to 1980, the experiment that changed everything. When You Can't Do That on Television launched as a 1-hour format in Canada, it looked deceptively simple. Sketches, kids, jokes, chaos mixed with live segments, cast members taking call-ins where viewers won prizes, music videos, live performances, and even a disco dance with local kids. But structurally, it was revolutionary. Children weren't just performing scripted comedy, they were mocking systems, schools, bureaucracy, television itself, adult hypocrisy. And crucially, they did it without moral cleanup at the end. Slime wasn't just a gag, it was a rebellion without consequence. Say, "I don't know," slime. The joke wasn't the mess. The joke was that certainty was fragile. From 1980 to 1983, the Roger Price comedy format continued to spread. After establishing You Can't Do That on Television in Canada, Roger Price's approach to youth television began to appear in the United States. Whatever Turns You On presented sketches without slime, but confirmed Roger Price's choreographic and moral scripts. Every gag, every sketch, every punchline followed the rules he had developed. Humor with logic, rebellion with consequence, children treated as intelligent participants. In 1983, WGBH Boston produced Don't Look Now. The series closely resembled the format established by You Can't Do That on Television. Even the familiar trigger phrase, "I don't know," was adapted to Don't Blame Me, alongside the introduction of Yellow Yuck, a yellow slime mechanism positioned as an American variant of the earlier green slime. Across these programs, Price demonstrated a repeatable creative framework. moral and behavior rules embedded within sketches, clear consequences for refusal to engage, and a structured form of comedy that respected its young performers.
Me watch public television, so you didn't see the part where Tina got yellow yuck. What's yellow yuck? So you haven't read today's script yet? No, they didn't give it to me until after I was on the air. So you don't know if you get yellow yucked or not? No, imagine giving me a script after I'm already on the air. Do you know your lines? No, so if I make a mistake, don't blame me, because I don't know what to do. What's this? Yellow yuck. Now you know. Why me? You said the magic word. What magic word? Read your script and you'll find out. You knew about this.
Notably, only Yellow Yuck carried the slime mechanism forward. Subsequent U.S. productions reflected the method rather than the material itself. This progression suggested that Price's approach was not dependent on a single show, network, or geographic location. It functioned as a system, a choreography of behavior, humor, and consequence capable of adaptation and longevity. Slime by Mattel Toys. Mattel's history with slime began in 1976. When Price was in Canada producing You Can't Do That on Television in 1979, he wasn't aware of Mattel's slime until the mid-1980s. And when he did find out, he didn't care. He had no intention of releasing slime as it was a punishment in his eyes. He didn't see it as a toy. Mattel, for its part, did not encourage children to dump slime on their heads. In fact, they warned against it, noting it could stain skin, hair, and clothes. Neither Price nor Mattel promoted or exploited each other. They were separate creations, separate brands. The masters of the universe. Slime toy history centers on the iconic 1986 Slime Pit playset. Figures captured by Hordak's evil horde could be covered in ooze, turning them into slime zombies. It was a messy but popular feature, coming with actual green goo. And even then, warnings advised against sliming furry figures. Others tried to claim it. In the 1980s, around 1983-1984, lawyers for Ghostbusters noticed actors on You Can't Do That on Television being doused in green slime, off-screen, choreographed, and on cue. They assumed it was copying their movie. Roger Price corrected them. Slime has been a part of my show since 1979. You're the ones infringing.
Unfortunately, imagery can't be shown here.
He allowed the actors to be slime, but it could not be called slime. The idea of slime could exist elsewhere, but the way it was presented, its choreography, rules, and moral logic was unique to his show. Slimer Slime was renamed Ectoplasm to avoid confusion. When Kenner released the real Ghostbusters toy line, the concept was similar, but individual branding and presentation were distinct. They filled it with ghosts and creepy objects instead of dumping it on real humans. Even as slime became commercialized, Price's creation remained unique. It was a system, not just a texture. It followed moral logic. It was triggered by specific behavior. I don't know. And it maintained authorship and timing. Why permission was granted, but control remained. Roger Price approved a line of licensed slime products, shampoo, bubble bath, and liquid soap, while retaining a 15% stake in all net revenues calculated before any division between Carlton Productions and MTV Networks. This ensured that his authorship, moral intent, and financial interest traveled with the product. Nickelodeon could brand it as Nickelodeon You Can't Do That on Television Green Slime, but the original meaning, the character, the moral logic, the rule remained tied to Price's creation. Slime shampoo recreated the exact feeling one would get from being slimed. Even the consequence, the shower afterward, was included. What most kids hated? Bath time. This kept slime in the same context as the show while making it fun. The original TV show Slime actually used Sunlight dish detergent until kids started complaining about soap in their eyes. The props team switched to baby shampoo, and that change later inspired Nickelodeon's licensed slime shampoo. It could not be turned into a toy, but it promoted better living for children as a playful consequence of their actions. Through this agreement, Price's creative control, authorship, and the logic of slime were protected, and the product could only exist within the framework of the show he had created. In 1984, You Can't Do That on Television was the selling point to kids who begged their parents. Parents who begged cable companies to carry Nickelodeon, booming them from the lowest rated channel in America to one that was wanted. Nickelodeon needed a change, a fresh look. Geraldine Laybourne asked Roger Price a foundational branding question. What symbolizes You Can't Do That on Television? At the time, Nickelodeon was developing its new visual identity system. The network's orange logos, designed by Tom Corey and Scott Nash and executed by Fred Allen Incorporated, Fred Seibert and Alan Goodman, used what became known as a fluid identity. The word Nickelodeon, set in a balloon extra bold font, could appear inside many different orange forms, abstract shapes, blobs, silhouettes, and experimental marks. Roger Price was shown these concepts. Crucially, Price rejected literal slime imagery. He did not want slime to be visually exhausted, overused, or flattened into a logo. Slime to Price was not a graphic, it was a narrative event, something that only existed when triggered on cue and within context. Instead, Price pointed to the orange blimp. The blimp, he felt, symbolized You Can't Do That on Television without consuming slime itself. It was bold, playful, surreal, and abstract. Yet it preserved slime by not depicting it. The blimp worked as a stand-in, something kids could associate with Nickelodeon, and You Can't Do That on Television without draining slime of its meaning. Early splat ideas were therefore abstracted, redesigned with lines, shapes, and geometry, so they no longer resembled slime at all. These were not slime splats. They were graphic forms intentionally disconnected from the physical act of sliming. True slime splat logos, the ones that visually resemble dripping wet slime, did not appear until much later, well into the mid-2000s, long after Price's direct creative control had ended. During the 1984 to 1988 period, slime was still meant to be rare, controlled, contextual, and protected. The blimp wasn't a replacement for slime, it was a way to avoid burning it out. Double Dare mentorship and denial of slime. When Double Dare entered development in 1986, its creator, who had been mentored for years by Roger Price, called Price directly to discuss the show's format. Price's response was unequivocal. No slime was to be used. At this point, green slime was still a controlled element of You Can't Do That on Television, governed by Roger Price's choreography, meaning, and rules. Price made it clear that Double Dare could not use slime in any form that resembled You Can't Do That on Television. No overhead dumping, no punishment triggers, no humiliation-based payoff. As a result, Double Dare relied instead on shampoo, water, foam, and prizes. Messy, but deliberately not slime. This absence was not an oversight. It was a boundary set by the creator of slime himself and respected at the time because of Price's direct involvement and authority. This distinction matters. Double Dare succeeded not because it copied slime, but because it understood what Price had always insisted on. Fun must come first, and slime was never just mess, it had meaning. Slime in Kids' Choice Awards. In 1988, Nickelodeon introduced green slime to the Kids' Choice Awards, but under strict approval from Roger Price. Only Ross Ewage, the stage director character portrayed by Les Lye, was allowed to be slimed. Not Les Lye himself, only Ross. Not the host, not the actors, not celebrities, no matter who they were or how famous they were. Not even the adorable Jeremy Miller. Child stars from any other show were not allowed to be slimed. Slime and Ross were Roger Price's intellectual property, and Roger personally approved that single use. At this point, slime still existed only as an extension of You Can't Do That on Television.
I don't know.
Post-1990, the leak that became a break. By the late 1980s, Nickelodeon had its sights set on slime and on Roger Price's creation. They approached Mattel claiming ownership. Mattel's answer was simple: they already had it. Their slime predated Nickelodeon and even the pilot of You Can't Do That on Television. At that point, Price's slime existed only as a story element tied to the character Jedediah in 3 and 3. Then, in 1990, You Can't Do That on Television ended production. And with it, the carefully designed rules Price had built around slime began to erode. The trigger, I don't know. The punishment structure, the narrative meaning, even Price's direct approval, all began to vanish. Slime started appearing on other shows. Wild and Crazy Kids used it as a game mechanic, not a story consequence. Later, Figure It Out turned it into an interactive prop. What was once choreographed, symbolic, and controlled had become an abstracted network asset, detached from its creator who defined it. Meanwhile, Nickelodeon and Mattel developed a new product, one without the rules, without the character, and without the original meaning. They called it GAC, but GAC was never slime. However, the public often confuses GAC with slime, and even today, fluff and other substances are generalized as slime. Roger Price never allowed slime to be monetized without rules. He opposed advertising aimed at children and refused to let the character or its moral logic be used as a mere gimmick. Post-1996 branding. After 1996, when Geraldine Laybourne left and Herb Scannell took control at Nickelodeon, the network began stamping its brand onto slime itself. Existing products were relabeled as Nickelodeon slime, often indistinguishable from earlier Mattel creations. What had once been a rule became a texture. What had once been judgment became branding. And what had once required permission no longer asked for it.
You Can't Do That on Television is protected by copyright. Who'd want to copy it anyway?
What do you think?
I just don't know.
Roger Price created You Can't Do That on Television in 1979, and green slime was his idea, his original copyrighted comedic device. Nickelodeon licensed the show in 1982, but the license never transferred the ownership of green slime. Permission was explicitly granted for a few exceptions, but never for ongoing use across other shows. However, in 2012, during an interview for Slimed, an oral history of Nickelodeon's golden age, Matthew Klickstein informed Roger Price just how extensively his intellectual property had been abused. Price discovered Nickelodeon is using green slime everywhere, turning it into a de facto brand image without asking, compensating, or crediting him.
I must say, though, I'm not surprised people haven't got sick of seeing it on Nickelodeon, and I sure wish I had a nickel for every time they drop slime on someone, but they say they don't have to pay for it.
He wrote to executives laying out the facts, the history, and his rights. Nickelodeon's response: they claim slime is just a stock comedic device, like a pie in the face, not copyrightable. They've used it for decades, so any claim is too late. They've registered trademarks on slime in multiple contexts. Price fired back: the contracts show what was licensed and what wasn't. He never gave permission for green slime to become their ongoing brand. He couldn't even know about it while living in rural France, disconnected from TV and internet until being interviewed, causing Price to rewire his life to the outside world with broadband. YouTube revealed the greater scale of the use. The letters show a clear tension, the creator asserting his rights versus a network claiming decades of usage and legal defenses. The contracts exist. The permissions are limited. Price's argument: maybe it's time everyone read the contracts, including Bell Media Incorporated, because copyright isn't optional and green slime isn't theirs to just take. What we see, Nickelodeon owes for the reuse. They denied Roger Price his dues. We believe that both Nickelodeon and Carlton Productions broke their agreements with Price, with ACTRA, and with the actors, including Les Lye. Price is the one who designed everything Nickelodeon stood for, everything they are. Yet they pecked the carcass of a children's show he created, spreading it across the Nick universe, and didn't even pay him. Slime went one way while his format went another. Remember what Geraldine Laybourne, Scott Webb, Fred Seibert, and Anne Sweeney said.
Roger was a powerful teacher for me because he really did understand what kids needed.
And I think one of the geniuses who really informed a lot of what happened at Nickelodeon was a guy named Roger Price, who was the producer of You Can't Do That on Television.
Roger had the pulse on where kids were and what their needs were.
It probably wasn't until we screened You Can't Do That on Television that came from Canada that crystallized where this was going. And that show informed everything that we did going forward.
They had one show that got a rating called You Can't Do That on Television. It's where the whole idea of slime originated. You know, we think that the rest of our shows should be like this too. We keep telling kids that we're fun, but we're really not, except for this show. And that's the reason that show got the rating and everything else got zeros.
You Can't Do That on Television, it was really successful, was because it was based on the psychology of where kids are. And I often say it's the most psychologically important show ever done for kids.
Nickelodeon owes a lot, obviously, to You Can't Do That on Television, not just the elements of green slime.
Slime was more than a gooey gimmick. It was a rule-based character, a choreographed action, and a legacy that predated any toy line or Hollywood property. Slime exploded beyond the United States, spilling into theme parks, resorts, and themed hotels. Visitors could buy tickets to be slime, to swim in slime, to make slime, but mostly to be slime. Through the 2000s and 2010s, slime was everywhere, always with Nickelodeon stamped all over it. One still wonders, how could a children's channel do this? This wasn't a producer experimenting. This was executives taking what did not belong to them, claiming ownership over a show they thought they had the rights to, but never did. Non-payment, indemnification, and copyright. Ownership is only part of the story. Money, legal obligations, and control over intellectual property are just as critical. Under the original agreements between Roger Price and Carlton Productions, and between Carlton and MTV Networks, Price retained copyright over the series, its formats, its characters, and its unique elements, including slime. These rights were never transferred to Nickelodeon. Yet, as the network exploited slime beyond the scope of the series, questions of non-payment emerged. Price had a contractual entitlement to a percentage of merchandising revenue, including licensed products like slime shampoo, bubble bath, and other green slime derivatives. That 50% stake was calculated before Carlton or MTV's share, meaning Price's revenue should have come first. Indemnification obligations were equally clear. Nickelodeon and Carlton had responsibilities to ensure that Price's copyright, moral rights, and approvals were respected. Any unauthorized use of slime outside the series could and should have triggered indemnification clauses protecting Price from claims or losses resulting from the commercial exploitation of his intellectual property. Copyright law further reinforces this position. Slime, as Price conceived it, was a distinctive, choreographed character with a defined narrative function, timing, and trigger. It was not generic goo, not a texture, and not a logo. Its creative expression is copyrightable. Unauthorized replication, adaptation, or commercialization constitutes infringement, regardless of whether the substance is physically identical. By 1990, when Nickelodeon began using slime in shows and ceremonies beyond You Can't Do That on Television, the network assumed the risk. Every product, every promotion, every broadcast without Price's consent potentially triggered financial liability for non-payment of royalties and breach of contract and copyright. In short, slime had been monetized, abstracted, and leveraged without the proper accounting, approvals, or legal transfers. Roger Price's creative control, authorship, and financial stake were clear. The network's actions, however profitable, did not change the chain of title. And in legal terms, that distinction matters because ownership is not just about who airs the show. It's about who created the content, who controls its use, and who gets paid when it's exploited. The closing! Woo! The closing statement. Ownership, authorship, control, royalties. These are not abstract concepts. They are the backbone of creative labor, the legal and moral framework that allows innovation to thrive. For decades, Roger Price created a universe where children were not passive spectators. They were participants in comedy, consequence, and creativity. Slime was not a toy. It was not a logo. It was a character, a rule, and a lesson. Yet, as You Can't Do That on Television became a cornerstone of Nickelodeon's identity, its creations, most notably Slime, were repurposed, commercialized, and abstracted without proper accounting or acknowledgement. Royalties went unpaid, approvals were bypassed, ownership was blurred. The story of Slime is the story of what happens when intellectual property is treated as an asset rather than a creation. It is a cautionary tale for creators and networks alike. The origin of an idea matters, and its chain of title cannot be ignored. Even today, as the series lives on streaming platforms, as Slime appears in branding, promotions, and merchandise, the questions remain. Who truly owns this legacy? Who benefits from it? And who decides how it is used? Roger Price's creations endure because the ideas are brilliant, timeless, and legally his. But the record is clear. Control, credit, and compensation were not fully honored. And in the end, the story is not just about green goo. It is about respect for the creative mind, the integrity of intellectual property, and the legal and moral responsibility of those who profit from it. This has been the exploitation of You Can't Do That on Television from Backstage Canada. And if you think everything was divulged in this, wait till part 2.
We gather here tonight in satin gowns and toxic green velvet curtains rise in splendor, trumpets cry and violence surrender in marble halls where echoes glide, a bubbling fade we cannot hide. Rivers start to flow, dripping from the balcony road, outer wings and diamond rings, now drowning ooze that softly sings.